Hello audience. In this video we're going to put together another Model T engine. Now this is the engine out of my 1913 touring car project, which you may remember a few videos back. I ended up taking it apart to pirate a few things out of it to get the engine and the truck back together, and I said it has a few problems anyway, so I'm going to upgrade a few things while it's apart and then put it back together. Well, now we're pretty much going to do that. First I'm going to explain just what we have here. As usual with Model Ts, this engine's kind of a mix and match of a few different things, and requires kind of a story to explain what it is. Now, first of all, I had a 1926 engine and transmission that came with a car that I thought was in okay condition, and I just drove it, put several miles on it. It did have a few weird problems though. Some of the valves never wanted to seal. It usually got water in the oil, water in the intake manifold, just some unusual problems. So I took it apart once to fix it and discovered the block had a lot of internal rust damage and it had several cracks in it, and it was just junk. It couldn't really be used. So I just kind of gave up on it and put it aside. And then sometime later I found this block at a swap meet. This was made in March of 1917, according to the casting date and the serial number, and it was just a bare block, but it was in really good shape. It was still a standard bore, worn out, but still standard. The valve guides were still standard size, the main bearings were still good. So I bought it and pretty much transferred everything from the 26 engine over to this. I got it bored 20 thousandths over, got new pistons and rings. The connecting rods were worn out, so I exchanged them for rebuilt ones, and pretty much everything else is off the 26 engine. So even though it's 1917 from the outside, it's got the later camshaft, it's got the late rods, the transmission, it's got the wide brake drum, it's got the later magneto that's made for a starter, and all that stuff. The oil pan was also pretty much destroyed, so I bought a normal 3-dip oil pan like a 17 engine would have. Used that, which is now in the truck, and I got an earlier transmission housing, pretty much built it up so from the outside it looked like a 17 engine. It didn't match any of the cars I had at the time, but it at least matched itself, which stuff like that matters to me for some reason. I've since had this engine in several different cars and put a lot of miles on it, and it's been working pretty good, but it's never been properly rebuilt, so it's always had a few little flaws in it here and there. And we're going to sort that out now and pretty much get everything to specifications. The first thing I had to do was, after I took this apart, I discovered the main bearings were out of specifications. They were still in good shape, but they were worn just a little too much and they were out of shims, so I spent a few weeks just trying to talk myself into ignoring that and putting it back together, but I eventually just had to go and get the mains redone, so those are fresh and new. And now we're going to assemble the rest of it. And if you're wondering why it's already assembled right now, it's because I'm filming this out of sequence. So let's get started. Now, if you're going to paint the engine block, we have to do that before we install it on the stand because the adapter pretty much shields the entire left side of the engine. Now, it's kind of an ongoing argument with enthusiasts whether or not these were painted at all, and if so, what they looked like. Now, in 26 and 27, they had a proper Ford engine green paint formula. Not really the same as what they used on the Model A's, but they did have a standard color. And if you look at the archive photos from that time, it pretty much backs that, so that's kind of a no-brainer. But 1925 and earlier, it's open to debate. Now, some believe they were just assembled in bare metal and installed that way. Some believe it had some kind of coating on it, like more of a wash than anything else. It was kind of black, and the first time the engine warmed up, it all got burned off. Some believe they were actually painted. You look at the archive photos from that time, and they're kind of all over the place. There's no two exactly alike. So the general rule pretty much is if you believed these were assembled in bare metal, you paint them silver or gray or a cast iron paint of some kind. If you believe they were painted, you paint them black. Now, what I don't like about painting these to look like bare metal is they have a clean, uniform appearance to them, which they kind of didn't really when they were new. They usually had like machine oil on them, they had greasy fingerprints, they had rust buildup on them, and this kind of looks like that, just about in its current condition. It's still got a little bit of paint on it. It looks like some older coating that's been burned off. It's got a little bit of rust around the corners. It looks really good to me right now. So what I think I'm going to do with it is leave it alone, and then after it's assembled, I'll just spray it all with some kind of matte clear coat and try and preserve this. This is generally not the kind of thing I do. Usually I try to make engines look clean and fresh and properly detailed, but I don't know why. This thing, it just looks good and it looks authentic the way it is. So I'm just going to go with that idea. Now the cylinder walls look pretty good, not really much anything wrong with them, but since I have it this far apart, I'm going to hone it and replace the rings just because I can. And this is one of the old piston connecting rod sets. It's whatever crop of reproduction pistons were available at the time, and they've been working okay, so I just cleaned it up and I'm going to reuse them. And it's also a rebuilt connecting rod. And looking closely, the first time I put this together I had good enough sense to mark which cylinder is for and mark the cap so that I won't go on wrong. Now I'm working on setting up the rod bearing clearance. Now the first time I put this engine together, I kind of cheated, because the rod journals are about 4 to 5 thousandths undersize, give or take a little bit, but they're still more or less round, at least within specifications. So if you need rods, there's two things you can do. You can either get the crankshaft ground to a standard size or a standard undersize, and then buy a set of rebuilt rods that are that size, or you can get the rod bearings custom made to the exact size of the journals. I did neither. I just bought a set of rebuilt rods out of the catalog. They didn't have 4 thousandths under, so I got a set of standard ones and then just took shims out until they were snug, and left it at that. The problem with that is the bearing didn't properly match the journal, as you can see by the wear pattern. So there was a lot more force going in a smaller part of the bearing, which caused it to wear down faster. Now the mains are set at 1.5 thousandths, which is more or less recommended. Should be 1.5 to 2. On this one I had to take out 3 thousandths, this one 2 thousandths, and these two I had to take out 4 thousandths. So they were all a little bit loose. Not enough to cause a problem, but enough to make a little noise. I have them all set at pretty much 1.5 thousandths now. So put the pins in and leave it at that. Now you might be wondering, the contact surface on the bearings still isn't right on target, so is it going to wear down again? It might. I might have to go through this all over again. This is what happens when you do shortcuts, and why you should do it right the first time. Now it's time to install the valves. Now the first time I put this together, I bought a set of brand new stainless steel valves with the stock keepers, and they've been working, so we're just going to reuse them. Even though it doesn't really need it, we're going to relap the seats anyway just because it's a part. Now another little thing I'll point out is originally the intake and exhaust valves were the same, and the new ones that you buy are the same way. But when I put this together, just for fun, I polished the intake valves a little bit to get a little material off of them so it would breathe better. Does it make any kind of difference? I highly doubt it. You may remember back in the Christmas lights tour video, I mentioned that this engine makes that Model T knocking noise, and I think this is what it is. It's some kind of aftermarket timing gear, and it's just worn out. I'd also point out that the crank gear was replaced when the mains were redone. The one that was on it was also pretty worn out, so this had a lot of backlash to it. So we're going to replace this. Now there is a trick socket made just for this, and I have one, but it's lost. So I'm going to cheat. Maybe I should line up the timing marks before I take it off. That might help. And there's the old gear. And it definitely has some considerable wear to it, which is just normal. And here's a brand new one that I bought. It's made out of nylon, which is apparently what the new ones are being made of. It's a standard size, which I figure is what we need because the crank gear has already been replaced. So let's see what happens. According to the instructions, the new gear is slightly thicker than the originals and requires a different nut. So they've included a brand new nut for it, which compared to the old one doesn't really look all that different, but this one might be modified. Who knows? So just for fun, checking the backlash on the gear, and when I first put it together, there wasn't any. I spun the crankshaft around 4 times, and it didn't loosen up. It's an interference fit. So I'm not sure what's going on here. This is a standard gear. This is a standard gear. There was nothing in the instructions about it. I don't know if it's supposed to wear in, if this is normal or what. But there's nothing really I can do about it, so I'm just going to leave it. Well, one thing is for sure, if this was causing a noise, it won't anymore. And that's pretty much it for now. We have the short block assembled and ready to go. So the next thing I plan to do, and you're going to love this, I'm going to install the magneto, get that adjusted and working. That's right, kids, this engine is going to have a working magneto. At least that's the plan. I haven't always had the greatest results with these. I've had a number of problems with them, but I'm going to try what I can with this. So that may or may not be the next video. We'll just have to wait and see. But anyway, that's it for now. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.